Hi everyone, I'm Barbara Podgorski, the Executive and Artistic Director at Musica Reginae Productions in Queens. We miss seeing you all in person so very much because it's not safe yet to do so. So in particular, we miss the children and our community concerts for kids. So Beata Moon and I thought, wouldn't it be a great idea to put some of our children's concerts up online for you guys to see. So this is going to be the first of a series of our virtual concerts for kids, which we will continue to do until it's safe to meet in person again. We'll definitely miss the interactive element that existed with you guys in the in-person setting, but we do hope that you enjoy these little shows, and we will always include the pieces that you've heard. So if you really like what you heard, you can go later on and listen to them again in your home. So today's show, Beata is going to do, you'll see in a few minutes, is called Guess Who and Did You Know? And she's going to talk to you guys about some elements that go into creating music. Beata is a pianist and a composer and an educator through Lincoln Center Education. And one of the lessons she loves to teach is the one you're going to hear. So it's all about what is a melody, variation, accompaniment, and the ideas of imitation in music. So you'll hear a little bit of music by Bach, by Mozart, some other composers, and then I believe a piece that Beata composed herself. If you'd like to get on our mailing list and receive updates through Constant Contact, you can email me at info@musicareginae.org. And of course, if you have any suggestions or anything you'd love to hear or a lesson you'd love for us to teach to you or to do with the kids, please be in touch with us again at info@musicareginae.org or by sending us a message on Facebook or Instagram.
Hello, how are you all doing? Thank you for tuning in. My name is Beata Moon, and I am a pianist, composer, and teaching artist, and I want to play some music for you on the piano. During these difficult times, I have found myself turning to piano pieces that I studied while I was learning piano, and music for me is so helpful during these times, so I wanted to share that with you. So this is called a Guess Who and Did You Know? The reason being is that I'm not always going to tell you what the piece is before I play it, and I want you to guess. And it's not about getting right or wrong answers. It's not a test at all. It's just a way for us to really listen carefully and to hopefully use that we're listening for clues. Now that's supposed to be a magnifying glass. So you know how detectives use magnifying glass to study and to find out, more in detail what's going on. So I'm hoping that we can use our ears to really listen and to give us clues to what might be going on in the music so that we can learn more about it. And some of the pieces you may not know, so it's also a did you know, like just a sharing. My first question for you before we start is, what do musicians and athletes have in common? Do you know what musicians have in common with basketball players, baseball players, soccer, swimming, tennis, biking, any sport, you name it? Musicians and athletes have something in common. Do you know what I have in mind? Both of them have to warm up before playing. And musicians, just like athletes, need to stretch and warm up. So, would you please take a moment to warm up your fingers with me? Let's stretch them. See how far you can stretch them. You can do this because it's really important, since musicians, we use parts of our body to play and make music, that we also need to be warmed up as well. So this first piece that I'm not going to tell you who it is, I would like you to try to guess. This composer liked to have each hand kind of imitate or copy one another. So for instance, if my right hand was doing this, My left hand would also copy. So see if you can listen for the back and forth between both hands as they imitate or copy one another. And if you can guess the name of the composer, or if you think you know who it might be. So, some of you might know that music already, but if you guessed Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, who lived during the time of before the United States of America became a country. He lived from 1685 to 1750. So this in the 1700s here in the United States, it wasn't even a country yet. They were still fighting the British, and they were people here living in what we now know as the United States, but it wasn't quite the United States of America. So Bach he liked to have each hand imitate. And they would also do different things together, but were you able to hear when there was copying going on? I'm going to play another Bach. This is a two-part invention, and this one you can really listen for the copying or the imitating, but also the shortness. There's short and then there's fast notes. So here's another one of Johann Sebastian Bach's inventions. Play one more Bach piece that I love a lot. It's also, there's things going on between the right hand and the left hand. You might hear this, or you will hear this, and then the left hand kind of copies and answers back. So this is one of his preludes. we talked about Bach and the imitating that goes on, the imitation or the copying between both hands. And we're going to go further along. So Bach died in 1750, and we're going to still go into the 1700s for another composer who you may know. And he lived during like the time of George Washington. And I'm just going to play an excerpt, part of music that he wrote. And this time, this is going to feature a melody. Now, a melody is just something that we sing, a tune. So this melody goes like this. And usually when we have a melody, we have an accompaniment. An accompaniment is kind of the support. So now the accompaniment by itself is not as interesting, but when you put the two together, it can sound like this. Mozart, you were correct. And if you didn't, that is totally fine too. Mozart wrote so much music for all different kinds of instruments and voice, but this was one of his piano pieces that has a beautiful melody. And what else that Mozart did a lot of was to use a variation. And I'm going to talk about a variation in just a moment. So, I just played music by Mozart that has a beautiful, where did it go? Melody, remember this, and accompaniment. So, melody and accompaniment like a bridge. So the accompaniment is like the support, and the melody is what goes above it. Usually it's above it, not always. Sometimes it can be the support comes from above, like if it's hanging or pulling up, but a lot of times the support is usually on the bottom, the accompaniment, and the melody is on top. And I mentioned that Mozart, I was going to talk about variation. And variation, do you know what that means? Variation is when you have something that's a little bit different, but it's still the same. So for instance, I like to think of pizza. If you have cheese pizza, plain, but if you want to have a variation of pizza, you could put toppings, different toppings, like pepperoni or ham and pineapple. That's another variation of the pizza, because it's still pizza, but it's just a little bit different. So for this theme, or this melody that Mozart wrote, he wrote some variations about it. So I'm going to just play a little bit of the theme one more time, or the melody actually, which is also the theme. Now, can you hear this while I play this variation? So that's another variation of this theme. He just changed it by making it faster with a different mood. One of the things that Mozart also liked to do during his day was kind of switch hands. So in this variation, he's having the left hand cross over to play the higher notes. I'll just play a little bit of this one. I think that was a way to kind of just have fun with it, and that's a little bit athletic by crossing over. And sometimes the variations can be slow, like this is a slower, different mood. So I thought I would end with the full variation of his last variation, which he usually played faster and a lot of energy, sort of like a big ending. So this is the last variation for this theme. Remember, going back to this theme melody too. Here we go. So you can see why musicians have to warm up, because sometimes we play really fast and do louder things. And I forgot to mention, you know how there's like air guitar? Well, feel free to copy and try to play along with air piano. So we're going to talk about another composer actually who's not as famous, and this is a did you know, because I don't think many people know, not even musicians know about this composer who lived during Mozart's time. Her name was Marianne Martinez, and her father was of Spanish descent, and she was one of the few women composers during Mozart's day, and they actually supposedly knew each other and might have even played the piano together, and she was quite famous for her time. But as was the case, since women were not always supported, her music didn't survive. Like, people took care of Mozart's music and made sure it was continued on, but Marianne Martinez's music, which she wrote a lot of, there's not as much out there that's available. So I wanted to play one of her pieces. This is the melody. And the left hand also has the accompaniment. So this is a piece by Marianne Martinez, who lived during Mozart's time. She was born in 1744 and she died in 1812. So she lived beyond Mozart because Mozart died when he was younger in 1791, but I digress. So here is Marianne Martinez's, the first movement of her sonata in A major. So we were talking about melody, which is a tune or something that you can sing, and accompaniment. And I like to think of it sometimes as a bridge where the support or the accompaniment is below and the melody is above it. And so now we're going to move into the 1800s. We were in the 1700s, and in the 1800s, this composer loved the opera and the voice, the singing, and was trying to imitate the sound of the singer with the melody of the right hand. So for instance, this is another Guess Who. Some of you might have heard this, and it might be familiar, and that's okay if you don't know. But this melody thought of as like a soprano singing, and the left hand would accompany. So I will reveal the name of the piece after I play this for you. This is one of my favorite pieces from this composer. If you guessed Chopin, Frederic Chopin, where did he go? Here he is. He was a composer from Poland who lived from 1810 to 1849. And as I mentioned, he loved the singers and he loved to try to imitate the singers and the melody of the right hand. And that piece is called a Nocturne. That name came from Of the Night. He wasn't the only one who wrote nocturnes. but he was famous for them. And actually, why don't I write down Nocturne, so you know what I mean. Nocturne. And so yeah, that particular one is played a lot and it's very famous, and it's one of my favorites. So I hope you enjoyed that. So I wanted to share a piece that I composed many years ago, and I also wanted to say that composing can be a really helpful way to find creative outlet for yourself, especially during these times that are so uncertain. So whether you play an instrument or sing or like to tap anywhere, I encourage you to make up your own music as well. This is called Ode, O-D-E, Ode, and I hope you enjoy it. So thank you so much for joining me today. Just a little review. We heard music by Johann Sebastian Bach, where he liked to imitate and have different hands imitating one another. Right? We also heard music by Mozart, and we heard a melody and an accompaniment that he put variations to, something that's slightly different from the main melody. And we heard from Marianne Martinez, and I don't have didn't have a big board to write this on, or I would have. These were from an earlier concert. So, who lived during Mozart's time, who also composed music, and she even founded a school for singing for women. So, and she knew Mozart during the time. And we also heard a piece by Chopin. And then also music that I just played for you that I wrote. So I hope that you'll continue listening to all different kinds of music and listen for clues. Maybe you can hear a melody sometime, or you can hear imitation or copying going on. So, and I hope that you can try composing and creating on your own. Thanks again for joining, and I wish you all the best. Be well and safe, and I hope to see you soon.